Imagine a commercial landlord, right? Walking up to a struggling, cash-hungry startup and just offering them a $30 million signing bonus to move into their building.
Which, I mean, sounds like an unbelievable stroke of luck.
Right. It sounds amazing. But there's a massive catch. In exchange for that cash influx, the startup has to sign this 10-year lease at an exorbitant premium rent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and not only that, they are strictly mandated to run their entire operation using only the landlord's proprietary, highly complex, smart building tech.
Right, which on the surface, well, it sounds like highly questionable math.
Exactly. But as we dig into this stack of SEC filings, financial reports, and these deep dive investigative articles on the table today, it becomes entirely clear that this exact mechanism is the engine behind a multi-billion-dollar growth playbook.
It really is.
So today, we are looking at Palantir. And our mission for you is to understand how this company is rapidly expanding its empire, not just by selling software, but by deploying a highly unusual software plus equity model. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the biggest strategic theme here is that the scope of what they're doing completely breaks the traditional tech industry mold.
How so? Like compared to other tech giants?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the historical growth patterns of a standard tech giant, the strategy is generally pretty straightforward. You build cash, you identify a competitor or maybe a complementary technology, and you just buy the company outright.
Right, standard acquisition.
Exactly. But Palantir takes a totally different approach. They often deploy capital as a strategic investor, secure an equity stake, and then tightly embed their foundational software directly into the very DNA of those companies' daily operations.
You mean platforms like Foundry or Gotham or their newer artificial intelligence platform, AIP?
Yes, exactly those. They aren't just trying to sell a software license, They are engineering this long-term structural dependency while simultaneously holding a financial stake in the success of the business.
Which means we really need to look at the financial engine driving this, because without understanding the capital flow, the tech footprint just doesn't make full sense.
No, it doesn't.
And our sources point heavily to their strategy during the SPAC boom. They didn't just casually participate in that. I mean, Palantir was one of the most aggressive players on the field.
Oh, absolutely.
The data shows they allocated at least $300 million across roughly 20, or maybe even more, of these SPAC-related companies.
And the velocity of these agreements was just staggering. I mean, in the enterprise software world, a typical Palantir sales cycle takes a long time. Getting a massive multinational to agree to a multi-million-dollar data integration takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months of intense technical vetting.
Right, that's standard enterprise sales.
But these SPAC deals were being negotiated and finalized in a matter of weeks.
Wait, weeks? That's insane.
Yeah. And the underlying mechanics of the investments explain why. Palantir would inject cold cash through a PIPE deal, a private investment in public equity, to help these companies finalize their transition to the public markets.
Okay, so they provide the crucial funding to get them over the finish line.
Exactly. And in immediate reciprocity, the newly public company would sign these massive multi-year software contracts to integrate Palantir's Foundry or AIP into their systems.
Well, this is where I have to pause and look at the sheer asymmetry of these numbers, because it honestly borders on financial engineering.
It definitely raises eyebrows.
In several of the cases documented in our sources, the total value of the software contract the startup committed to actually exceeded the initial cash investment Palantir made.
Right.
It begs a massive question. I mean, are these startups agreeing to these massive software integrations because they actually need defense-grade data infrastructure? Or are they signing the dotted line purely because they were desperate for Palantir's cash?
What's fascinating here is that exact tension is fiercely debated among financial analysts and auditors in our source material.
I bet. What do the critics say?
Well, Jeffrey Johans, he's a former tech auditor, pointed out that whenever a company invests in a customer and signs a massive revenue-generating contract concurrently, it demands incredibly intense scrutiny.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds a bit circular.
Exactly. It naturally draws comparisons to the dot-com era, where companies would essentially execute circular transactions to artificially inflate their top-line revenue growth.
Wow. And did it actually inflate their revenue?
Well, at their historical peak, investor analyses showed that these SPAC-linked clients represented roughly 18% of Palantir's entire commercial revenue. So the critics argue Palantir was effectively buying its own revenue to justify what was, at the time, a $44 billion valuation.
But, I mean, if they or just moving money in a circle, that house of cards eventually falls. How does Palantir defend this capital allocation?
Their defense is really rooted in the strength of their balance sheet and a massive bet on long-term enterprise dominance.
Okay.
Kevin Kawasaki, who is Palantir's global head of business development, explicitly countered the criticism by pointing to their sheer liquidity. The company is sitting on roughly $8 billion to $9.5 billion in cash and securities.
That is a lot of dry powder.
And they're generating massive free cash flow with minimal long-term debt. So Kawasaki's argument is that they aren't artificially inflating anything. They're utilizing their massive cash reserves to take long-term equity positions in companies they believe will succeed.
While ensuring those companies are built from day one on top-tier infrastructure.
Exactly.
So they basically use their balance sheet as a battering ram to create new customers.
Yeah.
But you don't just throw hundreds of millions of dollars at random industries. You'd want to target sectors where the data is an absolute disaster.
He's right. To prove the software actually works in the harshest environment.
Exactly. And looking at their portfolio, they went straight into the deep end, human biology and healthcare.
Biology is the ultimate proving ground for complex data integration.
Oh, for sure.
In a standard pharmaceutical or healthcare environment, the data silos are incredibly rigid. You have genomic sequencing data sitting on one server, clinical trial patient outcomes in a completely separate database, and supply chain logistics for drug manufacturing in yet another legacy system.
And none of them talk to each other.
Right. These systems fundamentally cannot communicate. If Palantir can drop their software into that environment and harmonize it, they validate their technology to the entire global market.
Which perfectly explains the investments they made in companies like Roivant Sciences and Celularity.
Oh, the Roivant deal is a perfect example.
Yeah, look at this. Palantir put in $30 million. Roivant turns around and commits to a 5-year, $39 million software subscription.
Right.
Now, our sources point out that at the exact time this deal was struck, Roivant's total annual revenue was only $23.8 million. They committed more money to Palantir than they brought in over an entire year.
It's wild. And then you have Celularity, right? A biotech firm focused on complex cell-based therapies.
Let me guess, another massive contract.
Yep. Palantir puts in $20 million. Celularity signs a $40 million partnership.
Wow. But why does a cell therapy company even need defense-grade software?
To understand why, we have to look at the mechanism of what Palantir's software is actually doing. Cell therapy isn't like manufacturing aspirin.
Right.
You are dealing with live biological material, patient-specific matching, incredibly tight temperature controls, and massive regulatory reporting requirements at every single step of the process.
So if something goes wrong, it's a huge problem.
Exactly. If a batch fails, you need to trace the failure back through thousands of variables instantly. By embedding Foundry into Celularity or backing healthcare AI firms like Babylon Health, Palantir is essentially turning these companies into high-stakes laboratories.
They are proving that their software can manage the most sensitive, highly regulated life-or-death data pipelines in the world.
Yes.
And if you can prove it at the startup level, you can sell it at the sovereign level. Which brings us to the £240 million elephant in the room. The UK's National Health Service contract.
Right, the NHS. And this isn't an equity play.
No, this is a massive 7-year government contract to build the NHS Federated Data Platform.
The scale of the NHS project is just monumental. We are talking about connecting vital health information across up to 240 different, largely independent NHS trusts and organizations.
That's a lot of fragmented data.
The objective of the Federated Data Platform is to drag the NHS from an analog-heavy system into a unified digital one to optimize bed allocation, clear surgical backlogs, and ultimately reduce wait times.
But we absolutely have to address the massive public friction this contract caused to the UK. I mean, the sources detail extensive protest, including activists physically blockading the entrance to Palantir's London offices.
Yeah, it was highly publicized.
The controversy stems directly from Palantir's long-standing contracts with military and border enforcement agencies. Specifically, protesters focused on Palantir's strategic partnerships with the Israel Defense Forces for war-related mission support, and their $30 million contract with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or IC, to track migrant movements.
And Palantir's CEO, Alex Karp, hasn't backed down from this at all.
Not even a little bit. He has been extremely vocal in his unapologetic support for the defense and security apparatus of the U.S. and its allies.
Because of that deeply entrenched military background, the documentation surrounding the NHS contract goes to immense lengths to outline strict, non-negotiable guardrails.
Right, they had to assure the public the data was safe.
Exactly. The contract explainer explicitly legally defines Palantir solely as a processor of the data. They cannot commercialize the NHS data, they cannot market it, and crucially, they cannot use it to train their own proprietary AI models, even if the data is completely anonymized.
And the data has to stay local, right?
Yes, the contract mandates that all data must remain physically within UK data centers, and Palantir claims zero intellectual property rights over any NHS-funded services or the foundational data structure itself.
So they secure the human body, the biology, the healthcare systems.
Yep.
But human data is, relatively slow compared to machine data.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us to a fascinating pivot in their investment strategy. They take the exact same software plus equity model and apply it to the physical world. Aviation, mobility, robotics.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, they are targeting telemetry.
Tell us more about that.
Well, if healthcare data is about tracking long-term outcomes, telemetry is about mapping the physics of the world in real time. Look at their investment in Sarcos Robotics, a company developing advanced military and industrial robots.
Right, the SOC financing.
Yep. Palantir funneled $21 million into Sarcos and secured a $42 million six-year software contract. This is a deliberate, calculated bet on the convergence of artificial intelligence and autonomous hardware.
And they didn't stop at ground robotics. They backed Lilium Air Mobility, which is an electric vertical takeoff and landing, or eVTOL startup.
Yeah, the flying cars, essentially.
And they invested in Wejo, which is a connected vehicle analytics platform heavily integrated with GM's ecosystem.
The mechanism here is brilliant when you step back and look at the underlying data streams. I mean, an electric aircraft like a Lilium jet generates millions of data points every single flight.
Like what kind of data?
Battery temperature fluctuations, aerodynamic stress on the rotors, weather interference, supply chain logistics for replacement parts. Traditionally, the engineering team looks at battery data while the logistics team looks at supply chain data.
Totally siloed.
Right. But by forcing these companies onto Palantir Foundry, the software acts as a central nervous system. It correlates the battery drain during specific weather patterns directly to the manufacturing floor's need to order new parts.
Wow. It's mapping the physical world.
Yeah.
Drones, electric aircraft, connected cars, satellites, they are embedding their code into the infrastructure of tomorrow.
Exactly. They aren't just selling software as an add-on. By wiring themselves into Lilium, Sarcos, and Wejo at the ground floor, they are positioning their AI platforms to be the foundational operating system for smart cities, autonomous transportation networks, and ultimately autonomous battlefields.
But here's the catch. You can use your massive cash pile to buy your way into biotech and aerospace ecosystems. But eventually, you hit the limits of your own internal corporate structure.
You do.
You have to fill the gaps in what your software or your own company can actually do.
Oh.
And our sources show a major shift in how Palantir acquires companies directly to solve this.
Yeah, historically, the direct acquisitions were purely technical capability buys. Back in 2016, they bought a Dutch startup called Silk to enhance their data visualization, and a company called Kimono Labs just to get their web scraping and data extraction tools.
Basically buying puzzle pieces to make their software better.
Right. But their recent acquisition behavior points to a totally different priority: aggressive commercial scaling.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The most glaring example of this is a recent acquisition of a startup called Sales Patriot.
Oh, this one is fascinating.
Now, if you know the lore of Palantir's early days, this is deeply, almost comically ironic.
It really is.
For years, Palantir operated with this notorious, hyper-arrogant engineering culture. They fundamentally rejected the idea of hiring a traditional sales team.
They thought they were above it.
Yeah. The internal belief was that their technology was so vastly superior to anything on the market that it would simply sell itself. Engineers would fly out, do bespoke deployments, and the client would be wowed.
But Sales Patriot is literally a company that builds AI-driven intelligence and automation tools specifically for sales teams.
Exactly.
It is the ultimate admission of commercial maturity. You cannot rely on bespoke engineer deployments if you want to capture the mass enterprise market. And the numbers show they are scaling massively.
What do the numbers look like?
In a recent quarter, their U.S. commercial revenue grew by an astonishing 137% year over year. To maintain that trajectory, you have to abandon the Our tech sells itself hubris?
You have to build a real pipeline.
Exactly. Acquiring an AI sales automation tool shows they are actively working to optimize their commercial pipeline, reduce the friction of acquiring new customers, and aggressively push beyond their historic reliance on classified defense contracts.
Which brings us to the most critical piece of the puzzle. The massive infrastructure partnerships they are building to support this scale. They aren't just buying startups, they are linking arms with the biggest foundational tech companies on the planet.
We really have to look at the NVIDIA partnership. While not an acquisition, it is arguably one of their most strategic moves. They partnered with NVIDIA to build out sovereign AI infrastructure using NVIDIA's advanced Blackwell systems.
Okay, let's clarify that term for a second because sovereign AI is popping up everywhere in these defense sources.
It is.
It basically means a nation-state having its own independent, physically isolated AI capabilities, right? Like not relying on a shared global cloud, but owning the hardware and software completely to protect national security data.
Precisely. And Palantir is integrating their entire suite, AIP, Gotham Foundry, and Apollo, directly into this hardware.
That's huge.
Furthermore, they are partnering with major players like AWS and Microsoft to deploy on Azure government clouds, and even partnering with Anthropic to bring large language models like Claude securely into the defense sector. They are weaving their platforms into the very fabric of global computing.
Which leads us directly to the end game. The sheer, inescapable gravity of the ecosystem they have built. When you look at the government contracts detailed in these financial reports, the numbers are difficult to even comprehend.
They are massive.
We are looking at a 10-year, $10 billion Army Enterprise Service Agreement. $10 billion.
Yeah.
They hold the $1.3 billion contract for the Mason Smart System, bringing AI into surveillance and targeting. And then there is Project Titan.
Project Titan is perhaps the most visceral example of everything we've discussed today coming together. It stands for Tactical Intelligence Targeting Access Node. Palantir won a $178.4 million contract to build these fully functional AI-defined mobile command vehicles.
Wait, like physical vehicles?
Yes. These are actual ground stations that take telemetry data from space sensors satellites orbiting the Earth and instantly translate and transmit that targeting data directly to soldiers in the mud on the battlefield.
And the only way a satellite can talk to a ground troops tablet in real time is if they both speak the exact same digital language.
Exactly.
This concept comes up constantly in the deep technical readings of Palantir. The ontology. I want to unpack this because it really is the secret sauce to their entire strategy. An ontology isn't just a massive database where you dump spreadsheets, is it?
No, not at all. Think of a database as a dictionary, a list of disconnected words. An ontology is the grammar and the context that turns those words into a fluent language.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
Well, in Palantir's ontology, a military tank isn't just a row of text on a screen. The system recognizes the tank as a distinct object that possesses a specific location, a current fuel level, a maintenance history, and a live ammunition count, all updating dynamically in real time.
So if a supply chain system recognizes the tank needs a part, and the satellite recognizes the tank is moving, the ontology acts as the universal translator between the logistics software and the targeting software.
Exactly. This raises an important question, though, about the ultimate strategic moat: infinite switching costs.
Infinite switching costs.
Right. Imagine you are the U.S. Army, or the NHS, or Airbus, who, by the way, has partnered with Palantir since 2015 and used their software to accelerate the delivery of the A350 aircraft by 33%.
33% faster. That's incredible.
Yeah. Once you have mapped your millions of disparate data points, every clinical trial, every supply chain route, every battlefield sensor into Palantir's underlying ontology, how do you ever leave?
You can't.
Right. The operational paralysis of trying to rip out the digital translation layer that connects your satellites to your soldiers is unthinkable. By embedding so deeply, Palantir ensured that replacing them is virtually impossible.
The scale of this lock-in is perfectly reflected in their financials. In just 6 years, Palantir's overall revenue has grown roughly 6.5 times over, hitting $4.48 billion.
Wow.
So what does this all mean? Well, what brings this directly home to you, the observer and the taxpayer, is the cost of this ecosystem. According to the analytical breakdowns in our sources, if you isolate their massive U.S. government revenue, it costs the average American taxpayer roughly $12.30 every single year just to fund Palantir's defense and intelligence contracts. You are quietly helping to finance the expansion of this digital infrastructure.
Which leaves us with a profound structural question to consider. Through their rapid SPAC investments, their strategic venture capital deployments, and their inescapable data ontologies, Palantir has effectively erased the line between being a vendor that sells software and a venture capital firm that engineers markets.
That's a scary thought.
If one single corporation manages to become the foundational digital nervous system for the global military apparatus, national healthcare systems, and the next generation of autonomous robotics, all while holding financial equity in the startups building that future, who is actually working for whom? Are these startups genuinely independent clients, or have they subtly been transformed into extensions of Palantir's global intelligence net?
It totally redefines what it means to be a technology monopoly. We aren't just talking about a company cornering a market. We are talking about a company that is quietly becoming the operating system for reality itself. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning the layers of the technologies you interact with every day, because the deepest integrations are usually the ones you can't even see. We'll catch you next time.